about now?
How about now?
That works.
How about now?
That works.
How about now?
Okay. We are live. Okay. So I called 2N? No, not 2N. It's just 1N. I called today's class. Um, Joe Biden and Me Too. Should I start with the Torah or should I start with Joe Biden?
Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Yes, Joe Biden.
You want to start with Joe Biden? Okay, we'll start with Joe Biden. What happened with Joe Biden? Joe Biden is the front runner in the Democratic primaries for president in 2020, right? And recent allegations have come out against him as having behaved inappropriately with various women.
Right.
Two to be precise. 2 women have come out, and I'm surprised that it hasn't come out earlier, to be honest, because Joe Biden has always been known to be very handsy, very touchy-feely kind of guy. Yes, or I should say, depending on which party you belong to, he's either handsy or touchy-feely. Okay, and that's the topic that I want to talk about, is the difference in perception here. Of course, on the Democratic side, many people, the reactions are varied. Many are saying that it's a shame that this is coming out and it's a very serious thing. Others are very cynical about it, saying that, of course it comes out now. Joe Biden has been Joe Biden for decades, and nobody's said anything. And it's interesting that when he's the front runner in a contentious race, that this comes out. And others are saying, well, that being the case, that may or may not be the case, but we are obligated to address this issue of Me Too, etc. So this is it's an E, not a Y. It's an E. That's right. Change the E for a Y. Here's the Y for you. Hi, how are you? You could ask her for the spelling. She'll get it right. Okay. So we're talking about Joe Biden and Me Too. Okay. So this is the one side of it. The other side of it is, it's all good when a Republican wants to destroy a Democrat, but when a Democrat wants to destroy a Republican, but when a Republican does the same thing, it's he can get away with it, and we all know which Republican they're talking about. But what I observed in this case is what looks like hypocrisy, but I want to say that it's not actually hypocrisy. Joe Biden is not the first person to come to be accused of inappropriate behavior. Again, whether I'm not getting to the substance of the allegations or not, it's not my point. But he's not the first person to be accused. And the reaction here is very different. I'm seeing a very different tone to the reaction overall. So I said there are varied reactions, but the overwhelming feel that I'm getting from people who are Democrats is a sense of frustration with the accusations, a sense of undiminished love, because Joe Biden was a beloved figure, right? Really, and the idea that this person is being accused with what has been in other cases a very destructive brush is a cause for concern. And many are pointing to the fact that if this were not Joe Biden, they would be having him drawn and quartered. he would be tarred and feathered and hung in the public square like everyone else who came before him. Right? So why is it that Joe Biden is getting special treatment? Right? This is the Me Too of Joe Biden. And it had me reflect on a experience that I had in my early teenage years, where someone very close to my family was convicted of a serious crime, okay, and was imprisoned because of it. Now, the thing about, could you get the door, please? The thing about that was that this was the kind of crime that I personally, I had heard of people being convicted of this crime before. And to me, a person who was convicted of this crime was, in my eyes, a criminal. And here is somebody that I knew and loved who was being indicted for who was being convicted of the same crime and is now a criminal. But I don't know that person as a criminal. I know them as my beloved person that I know and even respect and like. And I came to realize something about the distance of conviction, right? The distance of conviction is such that when you don't know someone and the only thing you know about them is a bad thing, then you can paint them as a criminal. The difficult thing or the real, it's something entirely different when you know that person and you know many good things about that person and they're also a criminal. So how do you deal with that, right? So this is what I'm observing in this case here, is where we have somebody who is beloved and who people know for he's a lion, the lion of the Democratic Party, I think you could say, is Joe Biden. And he right? For many years. He's an institution. And he's so well liked and people know so many good things about him. And now there's this kind of cognitive dissonance where so again, I also have to point out that I can't ignore the fact that, this is not something that was like a secret, kind of predatory behavior. It's just that people felt uncomfortable with the way he behaved. But I don't think anyone is accusing him of predatory behavior. So that's also a factor that I can't ignore. But it's okay. I could use this to riff off whatever I want to riff off. Right? Give me permission? Yeah. Okay. So that's where I see here is this dissonance that exists between knowing something uncomfortable about someone and at the same time knowing very great things about that same person, and how we deal with that dissonance. And this, to me, is the essence of the story of this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha is Tazria. Page 460. It's Leviticus 12. And the introduction is the Leviticus 12, and then we'll be going into the meat of it in Leviticus 13. Okay? So let's just skip to Leviticus 13 on page 461. Okay? Vayikra, Parak Yud Gimel, Pasuk Aleph. Leviticus 13:1. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, and to Aaron, saying, V'yal Aaron lemor, Adam, ki yev or besoro se'eis, o sapachas uvaheres, o yov or besoro lenegat tzoras. When a person shall have on their skin of their flesh a rising or a scab or a bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his flesh the plague of leprosy. So, of course, whenever we talk about tzaras, we have to remember that the medical diagnosis of leprosy is not what we're discussing here. We're discussing there's a medical diagnosis called leprosy, which is a plague, which we're not discussing now. We're talking about something that's described in the Torah as tzoras. The rabbinical tradition clearly identifies this as a pseudo-miraculous phenomenon, meaning to say that it is by miraculous, I mean to say that it isn't contracted in the normal medical ways. It's contracted. It's something that's a person is afflicted by God because of spiritual behavior, and therefore, while it has certain features that seem to appear like medical treatment, such as quarantine, right? The procedure for handling it, the procedure for recovering from it, is purely spiritual, with rituals and sacrifices, etc. So there is no. What's interesting also is that there is no treatment program. There's no remedy given for the tzaras. Only waiting, waiting in quarantine, and then after the plague is seen to have gone away, a person shall then go through a ritual of purification.
So in other words, leprosy is not a direct translation.
Correct. Leprosy is, for lack of a better term.
Oh, for lack of a better term. So it could be psoriasis.
Actually, isn't that interesting that the word sarat sounds like psoriasis? Yeah.
Yeah. I never thought about that.
Yeah. But again, we want to get away from the medical parallels because it's a spiritual. It's, let's say, it's a religious. I don't want to use the word spiritual. It is a physical manifestation of a spiritual condition.
And I'd fresh out the shower.
Let me tell you, psoriasis, they don't know the cause either. It's unknown. And I investigated, my husband has it, and they say that it is emotional.
Yeah, stress related.
Stress related and emotional related.
That's how I
It could be
understand it.
spiritual related also.
Fascinating.
That's how I understand it.
Fascinating.
There's no
No
cure
spiritual
for it
source
yet.
and no spiritual, no
There's no
physical
cure.
source.
There's no reason, there's no cure for it either. And according to the doctor, they don't know how it comes about. And they try to treat it, and it's untreatable. It's not something in 7 days will go away.
And it
Right.
just manifests down. It's here.
It starts
Random places.
Sometimes it's worse,
Amazing.
better. It's like arthritis.
It goes through phases.
It goes through phases. But
Yeah.
most of the time, it's
Horrible.
terrible.
I bet.
Yeah, they suffer terribly, and they have groups of people who
Support
have psoriasis
groups.
support groups. Yeah, but they don't know.
Excuse me.
Something
Excuse
like
me.
that. Now that you said psoriasis,
Fascinating.
it's
It sounds interesting,
There's
right?
Tremendous overlap in tone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never realized until you tuned me on to it. Thank you.
Yeah. Had you thought of that before? That the linguistic relationship,
I thought about it, and I know certain people that always are hashing others. And I said, this is like tzaraat to myself. But to myself, I never word it out because I'm afraid I shouldn't put.
right? You don't want to put it.
tag on anyone.
Yeah.
You're not. You're just voicing your opinion.
Tzoras.
Related to Torah?
No. The word. Well, okay. So David is asking a good question. Is the word tzaras related to tzuris? Yes. So the Hebrew word. So like this. I'll say like the Hebrew root of tzaraat is tzadi resh ayin. Tzaraat. And the root of the Hebrew word tsuris is tzadi resh hey. Troubles.
Right.
Now, there is some scholarship on the relationship between similar sounding root words, and Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch does a lot of work on this,
I find it
where you have two root words that have two letters in common, and that it's because they have a similar connotation. One of them came up last night in my Talmud study. The word lekalel to criticize, to curse, is a similar root as lehalel, to praise.
Right.
To pray.
To praise. Hallel,
Right.
Hallel.
right? Lekalel and lehalel. So hey lamed lamed is praise. Kuf lamed lamed is to curse. And the difference in the hey, actually, the difference between a hey and a kuf, if you pay attention to the letters, they look almost exactly alike. The only difference is that the leg of the hey stops at the line, and the leg of the kuf goes way down below the line into negativity. Into negative.
It goes out of the border.
It goes down into negativity.
I find that fascinating.
So isn't that cool? So that's but okay. So we're off topic. So yes, maybe, but technically no. Chalila comes from the word lechalel, which is also has similar to desecrate. Yeah. So it's
Overlap,
interesting. There's work to be done on that subject. Okay. So back to our topic here. The mitzora, the person who has this affliction, which is put on a person by God, right? This is our tradition. What is God doing when he gives a person tsaras? What is he doing? He's showing a person on their skin in a visible way that they're not good enough.
He's making them think.
They're doing. Let's say on the very simple level. On the very simple level, it's a sign that you've done something wrong,
Big time.
right?
Big time wrong.
Is that so? Then we might say that a person who has tsaras, who has leprosy, is a bad person. That's the
Not necessarily.
logical. You hear where I'm going with this? Yeah, it's logical. You say maybe not, but this person has clearly done something not good. They're being punished for it, and to the degree that they have to be excommunicated from the camp. This is not a good person. Now, at the same time, what's interesting is that, and I mentioned this last year, it sticks in my head. Mashiach is called a mitzora. Yeah. The Mashiach, the Messiah, is referred to as a leper. And throughout history, all the significant people, all the people who are referred to in the Torah as having had leprosy are largely righteous people.
Huh.
Think about it. Miriam, Naaman was the servant of Elisha, right?
That's right.
Moshe Rabbeinu himself had sarat, right? Moses had leprosy when he was speaking with God momentarily, but nonetheless, he had it. And Messiah himself will also be called a leper, right? That's the suffering servant, right? The suffering servant, by the way, is the I should say, I misquote when I say the suffering servant, because the suffering servant refers to the children of Israel, to the Jewish people. But nonetheless, the Talmud in Sanhedrin 98b refers to the Mashiach as the leper of the house of Rebbe. So, the Chivra Devei Rebbe, the Mitzora of the Beit Rebbe, of the house of Rebbe Yehuda HaNasi. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi is descended from David HaMelech, and so the descendant of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who is a leper. Right? I used the suffering servant only in okay. So how, on the one hand, we have the Matzorah being a sign of a sinner. At the same time, the people who effect the most significant changes in history are called a leper, a Matzorah. So how do we reconcile these two things? Now we come to the next line. We're Pasuk Bet. The last section, just before Pasuk Gimel. So we said, "Vayav or b'sarov lenegat tzaratz." You will have on the flesh of his, on the skin of his flesh, plague of tzarat. V'uvar la'Aaron HaKohen, and he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or Elachai b'banav HaKohanim, or one of his sons, the priests. Okay? So he is brought to the Kohen. The same idea of him being brought to the Kohen is significant, and we'll see it here on page 470. We'll go to next week's parsha for a moment, on page 470. This shall be, it's Leviticus 14:1, Vayikra Yudalit. It's the second pasuk in Parshas Mitzorah. This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought unto the priest. Yes? So there's a technical question here. It says he shall be brought to the priest. The next verse says, V'yatzah hakohen el michutz lamachaneh, and the priest shall go out, outside the camp. So is he brought to the priest, or is the priest going to him?
He is brought, and the priest probably takes him. Okay.
So but we see that the idea of him being brought to the priest doesn't mean that he has to go to the priest. It means something else, right? Meaning, on the one hand, we're saying he has to be brought to the priest. On the other hand, we're saying the priest has to go to him. And this I think should give us a view to everything now that we talk in our parsha on page 461 and on, about when the priest is what's the word I'm looking for? When the priest is calling him unclean, and is in a sense writing him off, you might say. Condemning him. That's the word I was looking for. He's being condemned, essentially, right? But we have to remember in the back of our mind, number one, that the priest is not, that the Metzorah, the leper, while it seems on the face of it that he's being condemned, our experience with charas is not so. That it's great people who have tzarat. And it comes from God, and God is love, right? So how do we understand this? And then we have this other factor, which is that he's brought to the Kohen, and the Kohen, and he's described as being brought to the Kohen, but yet the Kohen has to go to him. Another factor is, why is it that the Kohen is the one who has to see him?
Well, they don't have doctors at that time, and the Kohen is a spiritual leader.
So shouldn't he be seen by an expert? Shouldn't he be seen by a Rav rather than by a Kohen? Right? Meaning the difference here is that a Kohen is born a Kohen, right? A priest is a member of a family. A Rav, a teacher, an expert is somebody who studies, right? It's expertise. So if the reason he's being brought to the Kohen is because the Kohen is an expert, well, that's not borne out. That's not consistent with what a Kohen is. A Kohen is not by definition an expert. On the contrary, it implies, right? So he's not a spiritual expert either. Meaning there's no expertise at all in the Kohen. Now, you might say that technically a Kohen would be, right, there are, a lot of nuances and technicalities to the laws of Tzarat, and therefore you would have schools for Kohanim, for priests, to learn the intricacies. Possibly, but that's not what the Torah here is requiring. Furthermore, what I could imagine actually happening is that the Kohen would be accompanied by an expert, right? You would have a non-Kohen who's an expert in tzaras, who knows all the halachas, who is a specialist. In the world of rabbinics, there are rabbis who are specialists in various fields.
Absolutely.
Like doctors.
Right,
Exactly.
and so I don't know enough to prepare a get, to prepare a divorce for somebody. It's a very intricate aspect of halacha.
No doubt.
I don't have the expertise in that. When I have a question in medical ethics, I go to somebody who is an expert in halachot of medical ethics. When I have a question about family purity, I have an expert that I consult with who's an expert in biology and in family purity and that. And when I have a question in kashrut, I consult with an expert who knows about modern production of food and that, and commercial kitchens, and I'll consult with that. Right, and there are specific fields. Coming in the beginning of May, we're going to be having an expert from Israel, who's the director of an organization called Tzomet, which is the organization that retrofits technology to be halachically compliant. So we're going to be talking about the Shabbos elevator and the Shabbos electric wheelchair and the Shabbos stair lift. We're calling it the Shabbat hacks, MacGyvering hacks, MacGyvering wheelchairs for Shabbos.
I love it.
Right? So this is an expert. I wouldn't know where to begin. Right? There's the nuances of halach. I mean, I would know where to begin, but I wouldn't get very far. Let's put it that way. Okay? So everyone has their expertise. So you would have a Rav whose expertise is Taras. But no matter what he says, it doesn't matter until the Kohen pronounces. The Kohen has to do the pronouncing. And so what this to me says, and this is specifically with the idea that the Kohen is born, is that this is about manifesting the presence of God, not about manifesting the human judgment of this person, right? So there's the learning of the expertise is the human analysis of the condition. But in order for it to be significant, in order for it to be relevant, you need the Kohen to be present, because the Kohen is endowed by God as a right of his birth, which again symbolizes that it's not something he attained by his human achievement. It's something that is bestowed by God upon him despite anything that he could have done or not done. Right? A Kohen can't lose his status as a Kohen. He may be temporarily suspended because of misbehavior, but he doesn't lose his status as a Kohen.
But wouldn't it say that he goes with an expert?
It doesn't say that.
It seems that the Kohen is an expert according to what we read on the surface.
Yeah, well,
It seems that the Kohen knows exactly, because it does explain something about the skin. It doesn't say there is accompanied by anyone. It seems that the Kohen himself is the expertise.
So-
Expertise, to me.
yes. So, בין דם לדם, בין דין לדין ובין נגע לנגע, דברי רידבות ושעריך, וקמת ועלית אל המקום אשר יבחר השם, ובאת אל הכהן אשר יהיה בימים ההם, ועכשיו יגיד לך את דבר המשפט, יותר אשר יגיד לך.
Where is that from?
The point is that ובאת אל הכהן או אל השופט. That's what he says, right? If you have let's see. Let's look it up. בין דם
בין דם לדם?
בין דם לדם, בין דין לדין, ובין נגע לדגע. דברים י"ז ח'. Okay? כי יפלא ממך דבר למשפט, בין דם לדם, בין דין לדין, ובין נגע לנגע. Do you want to see it inside? Let's see it inside. It's Devarim Yud Zayin, Deuteronomy 17:8. Chet.
ומה פסוק?
Chet.
כי יפלא ממך דבר למשפט, בין דם לדם, בין דין לדין, ובין נגע לנגע, דברי ריבות בשעריך, וקמת ועלית אל המקום אשר.
If there shall rise a matter too hard for you in judgment, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, between stroke and stroke, nega and nega is referring to tzarat, right? That's the word of nega, is tzarat. Matters of controversy within your gates, and you shall arise and get you up to the place which God shall choose, and you shall come unto the priests, the Levites, and unto the judge that shall be in those days. So there is this idea of the judge, the expert, and the Kohen, which is a separate thing, right? The Kohen of the tribe of Levi is the correct translation here. And the judge. And you shall go and that's where you should take your issue, okay? So what's significant there to me is that this idea of there being of the Kohen being an expert is not the case. That actually, in the contrary, there is a distinction made between the Kohen and the expert, right? So back to the tzaras, okay? So the person who has tzaras is called to the Kohen, who is manifesting the presence of God. Now, in Kabbalistic symbolism, the Kohen is the symbol of God's love.
Yes.
Chesed is Kohen, Gevura is Levi, Tiferet is Israel. Chesed, love, is the Kohen, Gevura, strictness, is the Levi, and the Israel is the Tiferet, is the harmony. Which matzah do we break? The middle, the Levi matzah. The Gevura matzah is the one we have to break. The Gevura is the one that's broken, because it's because strictness must always be tempered.
Yeah.
Right? So right, meaning the characteristic of Gevura should never be left alone. It has to always be broken down, channeled.
How would you translate
Gevura?
Strength.
Well, so in Kabbalistic language, the word Gevura is strictness. Strictness, anger, strictness, anger, or gibor, or might, brute force, right? Restraint actually is another use. Ezehu gibor hakovesh et yitzro, right? So gevura is also restraint, and that's actually the most accurate. The limiting force is gevura.
So there is
The yin and the yang, attention.
We have to balance.
Yes, yes. So Gevura is the one that we break, okay? And that's actually also in the domain of Gevura that it's about limiting and breaking and withholding. That's the work of Gevura, right? Okay. So, but the Chesed, the Kohen, is the idea of Chesed, the idea of kindness and love. So the Kohen is the one who is going to be condemning this mitzora, this person who has tzaras. Again, seemingly inconsistent. And then we come back to this idea that the Kohen, while it says that the person is brought to the Kohen, in reality, the Kohen has to go out to the person. Which is to say that there are two things happening here. The person is being forced into a situation. They are being put in a situation where they're being condemned. And that's the reference of them being brought to the Kohen. Meaning circumstances are conditions that they experience, and circumstances in which they find themselves are pushing them to the edge. But now the job of the Kohen has to realize that this person is being brought to me. And this is not a comfortable experience for this person. And therefore, I have to go out to him. I have to reach out with love. Reach out with love and manifest God's love. Which again, is not something that is in the Kohen. The reason the Kohen is born and not taught is because while expertise is something that can be learned, that is expertise is about the human perspective. Born says that it's not about anything that you do. It's about something that is bestowed upon you, and God is kind of using you as a channel to manifest His love. And now, how can Tzarat be a manifestation of God's love? So now we come to your original point before, when I said that Tzarat is saying that a person is bad. So you wanted to say it's not necessarily bad.
I'm saying we can separate the individual from the action.
Okay,
Right.
good. So we can separate the individual from the action. How is the action? Of course. How is the action? How is the Tzarat itself a manifestation of God's love? And here I'd like
Warning.
You're being called on the carpet.
being called
You
on the
did something,
carpet.
pay attention.
Yeah.
Right. So
Redeem
It's a
yourself.
warning.
right. So now, to whom do you give a warning?
The
You give a
person-
warning to someone you care about.
Of course, otherwise you just watch
Right.
it. No,
So essentially, right, somebody who's hanging themselves, right? What do they say if your enemy's hanging themselves? Give them rope. Right? It's a very not nice thing to say. But the point is that on the other hand, when you have somebody who's doing the wrong thing, you'll stop them because you care about them. And so the act of now, in order to do that, you have to be able to separate the person from the action. And you have to be able to recognize that there's a bigger picture going on. So this is going back to Joe Biden. Okay. When people are saying, oh, Joe Biden cut him some slack, and others are criticizing and saying, oh, that's only because he's on your party and that's why you're being kind to him. No, that's not true. When we see somebody who we care about having this reaction, I'll say to my friends who are Democrats, this reaction that we have of care and concern for our friend whose questionable behavior is being exposed and called into question
Excuse me.
is that reaction that we have should be an eye-opener as to the way in which we should always look at somebody who sins. And of course, I'm not saying in this case one way or another, but certainly this is something that was cause for concern for someone and deserves being looked at, right? Now, when you point out something that deserves being looked at, you're doing it out of love. Now we go to the other side. What if an expert sees tzaras on someone? Are they supposed to say something? And the answer is no,
Because they're not.
because they wouldn't be manifesting God's love.
Huh.
And if a person is going to use pointing out sin to destroy someone, then they're missing the point. And this is what bothers me about the whole Me Too movement from day one, which is that removing someone from their position, destroying their life, and writing off everything good that they've done because not you could say goofed off, or you could also say it was a serious failing.
Yeah.
But even a serious failing,
Error.
right? Even if it's
That
a
was done
serious,
intentionally.
even if it was
Right.
right, a human error that was done intentionally, great.
Yes, unfortunately.
Right. But the point is that the reason that we see tzaras is that it's a manifestation of God's love and an opportunity to make good change. It's an opportunity to open up a door and to move to a higher stage, something which would never be possible otherwise. So as long as we're in a state of perfection, and we feel perfect, there's nothing wrong with me, I haven't done anything wrong, I'm good, there's no opportunity for growth. However, when we show, when we have pointed out something negative, so that's right there saying, you know what, you've graduated first grade, now you're ready to go to second grade. How do you know? You start failing. Right? You're now, this is a sign that you're now in second grade when you start failing. Thank you. I wouldn't. Thank you.
You know, one has to know about what the Kohen Gadol meant at that time in order to comprehend what this is saying. If my husband is a Kohen, my mother was a Bat Kohen. When they say the bracha, they said, "Levarech et
Oh, very
Amah
good.
Yisrael be'ahava."
Thank you for
We are
pointing that out.
blessing the nation of Israel
With
with
love.
love.
Right. That's a much better example of
Yes.
the symbolism of the Kohen as love.
The symbolism of
Yes.
Kohen has always
That he's
been
the one who
love.
blesses the
Beautiful.
people.
And a Kohen, if has someone there in the room who he does not, who had a fight with, he's not allowed to go up and to bless
Right.
unless
Wow.
he makes peace with him.
Right.
That's
Because he's
profound.
getting in the way of manifesting God's
Yes.
love.
That's
And if you go to a
profound.
Sephardic synagogue, they come and they kiss the Kohen's hands afterwards. Thank you for your blessing with love.
That's beautiful. I
Mhm.
love it.
It really means a lot. This is the background I come from, so this is how I see it.
Yeah, perfect.
Because
I love it.
Right? It's,
yeah.
it's
I
a beauty.
I think that it has now it makes sense to me what the Kohen had to do with Sarat, which never made sense to me. And it's true that Miriam did what she did. I don't think she did it in a malicious way, but she still did it.
You know what? It doesn't
It doesn't
matter.
Yeah, I was about to say
It
that.
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
What matters is
Yes.
that we've had the limits of our uh, the limits of our character exposed. And the reason that they're exposed is because we're being given the opportunity to transcend those limits. Now we come to why is Mashiach called the Metzora? Why is Mashiach called the leper? Because actually, once you look at it this way, through the eyes of the Kohen, it comes out that everything that the person is experiencing that's negative is actually a sign of an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for development. And when we reflect back on our life and all the things that we've been through, any wisdom that we have today has come with trips and falls. Any wisdom that we've come today
The journey
has come
of
with
life.
pain, right? That's the way our wisdom comes to us, right? We need, however, to put that to. So really, there's two steps here. There's the moment of pain, the moment of tripping and falling, and then there is, in our own lives, the resolution of that. Meaning, when we stand where we are today, using the wisdom that we have, it then retroactively transforms the pain that we had into a learning experience.
The negative turns to a positive.
Right,
As
right.
an experience of our life.
Right. And so the what happens when the world comes to Mashiach is that that's the moment at which the world comes to its full evolution, to its full development. And in that moment, only in that moment, would we be able to turn back and look at all of world history and say, it was all a learning experience. It was all developmental work bringing us to this stage. Right? So I'll tell you, I recently posted on Facebook. So it's a response to the comment was posted publicly. So I'll just speak to it. The post was like this: the ones that annoy us the most
Excuse me.
are the ones we need most because we need that which we don't have. The ones that annoy us the most are the ones we need the most because we need that which we don't have. Right? Meaning, when we're encountering somebody who's rubbing us the wrong way, I'm encouraging us to notice that this is because something about them is completely inconsistent with us. And the fact that it's inconsistent with us, rather than saying it's uncomfortable for me, we should say they are bringing something to the table that's so foreign for me. That's something that I have no I don't have in me at all. So I experience it as discomfort, as annoyance, but actually I have to be appreciative of the fact that they're bringing something to the table that I don't have, right? So I'll speak personally, okay? So personally, I happen to be, on the more creative, philosophical side, and I also, which means that I'm a creative problem solver, okay? But what annoys me very much is people who stick to the rules and people who are obsessed over protocols. That's just very frustrating and annoying for me.
It's
You
very
know,
hard to be a rabbi and feel that.
and feel
Because-
frustrated,
Yeah,
or are you
because
saying having rules?
having rules
Okay.
is part of being a rabbi,
Mm,
and very strict rules also that you have to be between certain
Yeah,
limitations.
Yes, okay, but there's different ways of approaching rules. Okay, so my way of approaching rules is always to look at the philosophy and the meaning behind it, and that's how I find my connection with it. But there are people who, and especially in human interactions, there are people who are just always focused on the protocol and the rules and the system and what are we going to do and what's the order that we're going to do it in and what are the and let's make lists and
Every
they
situation.
make plans and that, to me, that's very frustrating, right? Nothing bad about it. It's just frustrating to me. It's just, and I came to realize that frustration that I feel is a sign that I'm getting something that I don't have. Right? It's a gift. It's a gift. Right? If I'm only going to be me without anybody pushing protocols on me, I wouldn't be a good rabbi, because I'm gonna. I have the tendency to slip into chaos. That's the nature of the creative, is that we have the tendency to slip into chaos. We need to be contained, and so we're contained by protocols and rules. It's annoying, it's frustrating, but it's a gift, right? Now, so somebody asks me, well, what about, do we always need what we don't have? I believe not always. Also, oh no, that was the question. Yes, Rabbi, we only need things we don't have, but I can think of things I don't have which I don't need. Illnesses and other life problems, right? So I can't say this to a person who's currently experiencing that. I can't say that what you're going through right now has the potential to be transformative for you and to be meaningful for you, and that it can be it's when you turn around and you'll be much wiser for it. That's insensitive. You can't say that to somebody who is suffering. Right? So I couldn't answer, because they're in the moment right now. They're in the pain, and it's not yet it's only a learning experience in reflection. When we reach resolution, when the lesson is over, then you can look back and say, wow, what a powerful and meaningful experience that was. One thing that I know that I'm not a very good, one thing that I know I'm lacking in my ability to be a rabbi is that, Baruch Hashem, my parents are still alive and they should live and be well, right? Is that I'm missing the wisdom of having lost a loved one. That's something that I'm missing. It's right. It's not something one can wish on anyone. However, a rabbi who lost someone has a certain wisdom that I don't have. Okay? Tell him that while he's in the middle of loss. Impossible. It's hurtful, insensitive, unreasonable, and just stupid. Right? Only somebody who never lost someone could say something like that. Right? So,
well, you're fortunate that you have both parents. It's like having a seat to lean on.
yeah, absolutely,
Although
absolutely.
they are not supporting you financially, but there's a support there.
Absolutely. I know that I have my parents. It's a sense of security. Look, the point that I'm saying is that there is a wisdom that comes from pain and difficulty, and that is the wisdom of tzaras. Mashiach, but you could only recognize it as wisdom when it's over. When you're over it. When you've accepted it, that's when it becomes wisdom. That's when it becomes a blessing. And so the being brought to the Kohen, to me, signifies that it's these painful experiences schlepping us to the Kohen. We are schlepped. We are dragged into our learning experiences. And therefore, the Kohen has to come to us with love and support, manifesting Hashem's love, which says, as Cindy said earlier, separating the person from the act, which says God loves you and accepts you. You are God's child and you're perfect as you are. Meaning, if we are God's, manifesting the way God looks at me says, as God's creation, I'm necessarily perfect. Because to say that God's creation is imperfect is to say imperfection in God. At this point in time, while I'm in a state of sin, there is a temporary external on the skin appearance of sin, of imperfection, which is meant to bring out a deeper and higher awareness of how perfect I am. That wisdom that comes through sin, that wisdom that comes through suffering, through pain. And this is the idea of the Mashiach, where currently we're suffering and struggling as Jews, and we feel spiritually unfulfilled, and we are scratching, climbing up the mountain by our fingernails, trying to stay connected to our Jewish identity and trying to keep it real. And that's being michutz lamachana, being separated, being outside of the camp in which is found the Holy Temple. But at the same time, when Mashiach comes, he will point to all this experience and say this was tzarat. This was only an external manifestation. It was only an external appearance that was meant to bring out a deeper awareness and a higher connection. But all along, Mashiach was always here. All along, the redemption, the truth of God's presence in our lives, and the truth of the fact that God is in everything, and that everything is good because it's connected with God, was there, but we weren't able to appreciate it and see it because we hadn't had our eyes opened by the pain of struggle and sin. So to conclude now, just to wrap it up, Joe Biden, when a Yid sees, when somebody sees a loved one who sins, and we have that dissonance, we should notice that. And remember that every time we point to someone who sins, and rather than pointing at that person and calling them a sinner, we should send that person messages of hope and love, which is to say, the fact that your sin is being seen is not a contradiction to the fact that you're a good person. Be with them, and by giving each other hope and support, we can create a space in which that person will be able to grow through their pain.
It's
Okay.
something like Eov, what you say to Eov when he's suffering.
What can you say to Eov when he's suffering?
Yeah.
What can you say?
What can you say? Just be there and listen.
Right. The difference here is that we're talking about tzarat is associated with sin, right? So to me, this is what I'm struggling to articulate. Did suggest that he has sins, right? The thing is here, so Eov is terrible and extreme suffering. The thing here is that our rabbinic tradition clearly indicates that the tzarat is associated with sin, and he brings a sin offering as part of the ritual. So it's embedded into the process, right? So what I'm struggling to articulate here is how we treat somebody who's done a bad thing, right? And that to me is what the story of tzarat is. the way we treat somebody who did a bad thing is not write them off. It's treat them as a friend. And support and hope and encourage the good parts of them, because that's the job. That's what the Kohen is there to manifest. The Kohen is there to manifest God's love, and in God's love, all of us are perfect. So that's the Kohen's job to manifest. Right? It's not about measuring the degree of the sin, which would be the job of the shofet, of the judge. Right? It's manifesting God's love. So that's the Mitzorah. So I want to say that. So again, the Democrats who are seeing Joe Biden being called out and feeling at the same time to want to support him and encourage him should do the same when they see a Republican being called out for whatever. And the Republicans who are able to look past the transgressions of so-and-so should at the same time look past the transgressions of so-and-so and encourage and support and help with growth. And of course, I'll conclude by saying that the world is made up of opposites. And so just like I said about the annoying, right? We also have to realize that the annoying is those who point out our tzaras is also annoying, right? They're giving us a gift of something we couldn't see ourselves. Okay, so that's just a little food for thought at the end.